Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be able to speak to so many people in the room here today who are interested in manufacturing and driving our competitiveness. My talk today and my role at the university, why I've been brought here, is we help firms innovate. We do this, as Mark said, there's many ways to innovate, but we actually help firms innovate by innovating their business model first and really getting them to understand, well, who is your customer and what problem are you trying to solve? We do this through a structured way of design thinking, which has really exploded over the last 10 years. And design thinking, you may know as, design, as we heard before, is a product. But there's a structure and a discipline to understanding your customers and innovating and de-risking inside an organisation. Why do we do this? One, it helps the economy grow by helping firms grow. But secondly, it actually gives us a lot of insights to say, well, if that's how firms are going to be innovating, as a university, how should we respond to this? What do we need to do differently to make sure we have education programs that are matched to this, that we have research engagement models that really underpin this demand-driven system? So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. But it was really good to hear first up from Raphael talking about the Dublin 10 times of innovation, because what he showed there was essentially a business model. You have to have really good customer engagement with your customers, you really need a good back end that aligns to that, and you need a good product and service. The only thing I'd add to that is, rather than just looking at configuration and offering, where's the research on customer? How do we make sure we have the right customer engagement? And I suppose in building on from Mark, it is culture. What we're talking about is embedding a culture inside of an organisation. And I want to thread this through to my theme today, and again, building upon what Carsten was saying around industry and Industry 4.0. And so there's this, I want to start with this interesting article that came out of the World Economic Forum. Is it just Groundhog Day? And we heard a lot of the technical opportunities of Industry 4.0, and I'm not going to dismiss that. And it's definitely not my area of expertise. But what it's arguing in this paper here is, well, manufacturing's always been part of change. Whether it's been, going to a high-cost environment or actually looking at some form of new technologies. It's had to respond to remain relevant. And Industry 4.0 is just another form of that change that actually shifts where labour is in an organisation, and you must respond to it. So the question is, if Industry 4.0 is so prevalent in our thinking, again, a lot of the people in this organisation, in this room today can speak at detail on it, what are the opportunities we can afford? What else could we do with Industry 4.0 as we see it as a catalyst for change rather than just a mechanism to get a better product or service? Now, we can't underestimate the amount of investment that's going into new technologies or advanced manufacturing is significant. But my question comes back to is, if we're investing this much in technologies, are we matching that with the same level of investment in understanding what problems we're working on? Are our businesses having that same level? Or are we going to be making something better and faster, but still that actually has no real value? And so I believe the problem is really clear and known. This was a report done by the National Science Foundation in the US, or National Academy of Engineering, sorry. A new paradigm is needed for making value, which is much larger than making things. And I often spend a lot of time with manufacturers, SMEs through to large corporates, and I've worked in them. And often we get caught up in this notion of making things, and there's very good divisions, you can time box that, you can actually manage it, to actually making value, which is very intangible. And the systems in place don't allow us to actually have that same level of rigour around it. So making things, making value, is about integrating that customer understanding, that R&D, and all the processes within that. Now for me, a lot of those things down there, R&D and manufacturing processes and delivery, they're just activities of a business model that need to be designed. They need to be designed around a common purpose. My background's industrial design, so I've done products quite complex, and I'm very good at actually manipulating different materials and systems to get a great solution. But if you abstract that, a business is just a series of contradictions. It's a series of activities that need to be aligned to come across one core problem, your customer. So why do we do this? Why do we see enough of this? And why do we see the focus or the ease of actually coming back to, let's just create a better widget, or let's actually invest in new technology services? I'm not saying that's actually not needed at all. It's a key part of differentiation. But what are the other parts? And for me, you look at John Rice, the thing that holds big companies back, and again, I'd say any company, that you end up with an environment where people are afraid to fail. I think this is what Mark was talking about, that permafrost, that culture. These antibodies inside organisations, we end up just solving the things that we're most comfortable in solving. Okay, and if you're coming from a very engineering-centric organisation, that goes back to the systems in place. How do we actually start to challenge some of that? Because often that's not where the problem is. So this is a model we use, not our MG Taylor's model, but we've adapted it a few times. This is how we see most companies come to us. This is the problems, and they may resonate with you. If you look at, the rate of complexity that firms have to deal with today, whether it be through technology or through complexity of their supply chains or markets, and the time or rate of change they have to respond to it is exponential. But the ability of organisations to respond to that is rapidly in decline. And it's that delta that we want to address. You may be sitting in there saying, yeah, we have that same problem. How do we actually, if we're being asked to respond so quickly to very complex problems, the simple response is we just make those complex problems simple. And we actually solve the known things. How do we immerse ourselves into that complexity? How do we actually build ourselves and actually allow us some new thinking around innovation? Again, Australia doesn't sit so well. Apologise for the graph. This is actually from the Australian Innovation System Report. The middle two. Our culture of innovation and our siloed mentality far outweighs world's best practice. So if we're asking firms to deal with complexity, and Industry 4.0 brings a real opportunity to deal with new complexities, do we have the right culture or the right mindset to allow us to address it? And that's what we've been working on. So again, World Economic Forum talks about we need new skills in our organisations. Where are they? Where are we getting these skills from? And are we giving graduates who have these skills? We're moving away from that focus on complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity. They're the jobs of the future. But talking to a lot of students, this is not what they're coming often to, or not they're perceiving the value of an education. It's around disciplinary knowledge. It's around technical expertise and competencies. Yes, all very well required. But some of these softer skills need to be invested in our students, but also need to be absorbed by our companies and rewarded in a certain way. So design thinking is a process to do that. Now you guys have all seen design in some form, and it's most commonly understood as a product, an outcome, and a process of making these products. We talked about new product development earlier. But design thinking is slightly different. Design thinking is that very human-centric, iterative process that allows you to understand what if, to go further and explore before jumping to a solution. In business, it often gets seen as inefficient. Why are we going back and asking our customers again? Why are we challenging some of those assumptions? Why are we asked to actually do a bit more work in R&D that's non-technical? Because it's a process of de-risking, and design is very much around risk mitigation. So I did a study for the federal government a few years back, and we tried to find what were these firms that led by design. What were they? They didn't say that, they didn't actually promote themselves, but they had certain characteristics, and you may know some of these firms here, good Australian companies. They all had that really, really clear sense of purpose of who their customer was, and they invested in their customer as much as they invested in their technical competencies. Okay? They allowed their staff to fail and explore new opportunities. They innovated not just around the product, but around their entire business model. And they strive to be world's best. Okay? And in doing that, they had to make fundamental shifts inside their organisations. Now, there are a handful of companies. That list is now growing, I have to say, by some of the work we've been doing and others have been doing as well to embed this thinking inside organisations. So, I said earlier, that's great, we can go out and help companies, but what do we get out of it? How do we make sure there's a future set of workforce and capabilities and leaders that's able to be absorbed into your organisations? And so at UTS, I don't sit in the faculty, I report into the Provost, Chancellor. And we cut across all the faculties and we go out and our research centre goes out and actually helps industries disrupt themselves with this thinking. We then take that back into these new programs, and there's one program called the Bachelor of Creative Intelligence, a strange name. It's a double degree, a true double degree. So students enroll in engineering, accounting, management, nursing, or design in their proper semesters. In summer and winter, we bring them all together. We bring them all together and we get them to talk about complexity. We're talking about decision making, influence, leadership, how to work with very complex systems by putting them in studios that run over 4 to 6 weeks and allow them to really look at the world in a different way and actually drive change. There's only a small number of places for these students, about 150. We had 5,000 applications this year for that. There is a strong demand for students who don't want to be siloed. The risk, but is, it would be a failed experiment, I always say, if those students come out of their 4-year degree, because it is a 4-year degree, thinking there's a world ready to absorb them. That's the supply side. The demand side has to change as well, which is you guys. You have to be able to absorb them and let them into your organisations and use their expertise to help challenge you and shift some of your thinking about what the future opportunities are. I'll leave you with, Australia doesn't have the best record of industry-academic collaboration. Let's not just see Industry 4.0 or the technologies around that as just a solution. Let's see it as an opportunity to actually open up the conversation, to actually understand where we can actually start to drive some change and some new thinking. Thank you very much.